What's up, YouTube? So today let's talk about what is the very best cardio for you. Cardio, I'm sorry, I know. Everyone hates it. Even the people that love it still kind of hate it, let's be honest. But this is a good way to think about and look at cardio, running, cycling, swimming, anything at all that relates to how you want to move your body from a cardiovascular health and fitness perspective and do the lifting at the same time. Or if you are a runner or a triathlete, a cyclist or something, and you really hate lifting, they're really useful ways of integrating these ideas for both sides of the spectrum. So let's start with that. First of all, it's not a spectrum. Cardio and lifting are not really the opposite kinds of things. In a lot of ways, there's this really fascinating overlap when you think about programming either one. And within that programming, you're essentially just trying to pull together and accumulate as much volume in specific areas as you possibly can. We'll talk a little bit about exactly what I mean, how to do that within the scope of your program in just a second. This whole process is really just about stimulus recovery adaptation, those SRA curves. And if you're thinking about it like that, all of these things can kind of fit in that same continuum within those same curves as we try to accumulate as much of all of it as we can to fit our particular goals. So the answer to what is the perfect cardio for you, unfortunately, it depends. I'm sorry, it depends. I know I'll get through the it depends and we'll give you something specific a little bit toward the end here, I promise. But I need to explain why it depends first. It depends because there really isn't a universal answer for cardio modalities. What it comes down to is what is the thing you care about the most? And what is the cardio that fucks with the thing you care about the most, the least? That's it. Do as much of that in a variety of different ways as you possibly can, such that it fucks with the thing you care about the most, the least, but you're getting as much of this other thing as possible. The same thing goes as if you're a cardio-specific athlete, if you're a runner, if you're a triathlete, a cyclist, whatever, it doesn't matter. Find the strength program, the strength and conditioning program, the lifting program, whatever, that fucks with your running the least. Because if that's the thing you care about the most, you want to be supporting that, not hurting that. So that's the first and foremost way of thinking about how to coordinate and tie together all of these things. Now, there doesn't just have to be one way of doing those things. For example, if you were a power lifter, you're going to be looking at trying to limit the amount of especially cardio that beats your legs up. Right? You're already doing several things, squatting, deadlifting, all the accessories that can kind of put a lot of stress and tax on your lower back, on your knees and hips and joints. So finding cardio modalities that don't screw up that same system could be really, really useful for you, especially if you don't really care about running. There's no reason to kind of be like a hybrid athlete where you're out running and lifting heavy at the same time if that just doesn't strike you as being interesting. You can ride the bike, which is often one of the things that's most studied in terms of interference effect, to show that there really isn't one, that you can ride a bike for a long period of time and it doesn't really seem to negatively impact your lifting at all. Unlike running, which is very high impact, you're using a lot of the same joints, a lot of double, triple, and even 6 times body weight forces on those joints. It can be a lot, and it can be too much to recover from, such that it then sort of screws up your lifting. None of these kinds of cardio modalities are necessarily better or worse if you're not trying to get a specific test for those things. They're all just tools in the toolbox. You're looking for the right mix, and that depends on your schedule, your life, your recovery, your resources. Just find the one that fits, stick with it, and do a pile of it. Do it in different durations, do it in different intensities, a little bit faster, a little bit slower, breathe a little harder, breathe a little softer. Break a crazy sweat, don't sweat so much. But just get as much of those kinds of things as possible. And it really is that simple. You can overcomplicate this like crazy if you want to, doing a variety of different zones, doing lactate testing and all that. And in fact, that's where I'm going to talk about where some of this confusion ultimately comes from. I think that over the last, 5-6 years, running has gained so much more popularity for a variety of different reasons. And I think it's as simple as to say that there was a flywheel that got started during the shutdown times, the times that shall not be named. And I think that what a lot of people realized is I still want to move my body. I still want to feel good, but everything is closed and I can't do anything. So let me go out for a walk. Let me go out for a run. Let me ride my bike. It's all cardio, right? And so there was this influx of people getting into cardio for the first time maybe ever, or back to cardio for the first time in a long time. You saw Peloton, for example, explode during that period of time. You couldn't even buy a treadmill because everyone bought treadmills. They were sold out everywhere. It took a year to get it delivered. And then just people going outside, And so because of that, if you noticed in the last 5 or 6 years, Whereas before, just pick on Asics, had one decent daily trainer that was a good running shoe. And it was something that they were proud of. And they were like, wow, look at this amazing Nova Blast shoe that we have. It's amazing. And now they've got like 14 daily trainers, and Nova Blast is the worst of them, right? As more people come into the space picks up on that. Businesses realize it. They create more products. They create more marketing. They create more buzz. There's more people doing it. There's more influencers. There's more popularity. There's more YouTube channels and more coaches and everything where you can get all this stuff done. And that just kicks that flywheel even more, because now all of those people are now out buying the shoes, buying the gels, buying the electrolytes, joining races. And you've seen this kind of across the world. All of these major marathons are getting more people signing up than they ever have, to the point where they usually have to go to lottery systems now. And all of that comes from the idea that we've got so many more people engaged, and that's awesome. But because of that engagement, we have a lot more information now too. And that information, as it trickles down and out across a variety of different people and across different kinds of people that are listening to it for the first time, it can be very confusing, and it can make you feel like it's impossible to even get started. So a couple of years ago, everything was about zone 2, long, slow runs, get as much zone 2 as you can, as much conversational pace as you can. And then it was like, no, we hate zone 2. Everything needs to be faster zones. You should be doing intervals. VO2 max is the only thing that matters for longevity. Like in my parents' era, it was always just go for a walk, like go for a walk for your health, get your steps in, right? Like that's where we started. And we went from that to like, if you're not doing all out sprints several times a week, you'll be dead. All of these points of view are marginally correct. That going for a walk is good for your health and cardio. Doing lots of zone 2 running is good for your health and cardio. Doing VO2 max work is good for your health and cardio. And it's not necessarily fair to say that there is one thing that is the only way to do this. And in fact, if you look at a lot of studies where VO2 max is measured, even long, slow running can improve VO2 max, especially in untrained people or people who are not wildly fit to begin with. And I think that that's where you start to see some of these overlaps occur. It's really just more about showing up, doing something, doing a variety of intensities at that things, and then trying to accumulate as much of that thing as you possibly can, whether that's cardio, whether that's strength training or hypertrophy work to put on muscle. It seems to be the case that kind of across the board, we're looking at the same base information that gets you something like 80 to 90% of all the benefits you're going to get from it. Not necessarily having to put in 20 hours a week of training or the gym or cardio or anything else, but getting the vast majority of the benefits with fractions of that time by just keeping it simple, accumulating a pile of the stuff you care about as often as you can, as much as you can, and still recover and live a happy, full, and complete life. That's kind of it. It really is that simple. And I think where a lot of coaches come into play is because they do try to overcomplicate it to provide value to you. Yes, that is it, but let me get you there 5% faster. Let me get you to that end date or to that finish line, and we'll shave 30 more seconds off. And for some people, that might be worth it. And for other people, it's just not, because that 30 seconds of shaving off that time, for example, in a half marathon, might mean that you're having to put in an additional 3, 4, or 5 hours of training in a given week to only shave off that 30 more seconds. For some people, that's absolutely worth it. For other people, it is absolutely not worth it. And I think it's very important to understand yourself and your goals and why you're really doing any of this stuff to begin with in order to figure out if it's truly worth it for you. Because it's in the worth it that you decide to stick with it or not. Right? That's where people get burned out. Is they do the extra 3, 4, 5 hours of work a week to only shave off 30 seconds and realize it might not have been worth it to me after all, feel burned out, maybe get some niggles, some injuries and things like that, and then end up having to take time off. And it's through that time off, the inconsistency, that they never come back. So to get that extra 30 seconds, you cost yourself 30 years of actual real longevity. Probably not worth it. The next thing that people are always afraid of is that cardio is going to kill your gains. It absolutely does not. It absolutely does not kill your gains. There is an interference effect when it comes to cardio and lifting. The interference effect is like if you're doing really stupid programming, and I know because I've done really stupid programming, or simply not eating and recovering well in between these bouts, yes, you will see negative gains. Specifically, often you also see some negativity as related to like pure power. So like if you're doing a lot of long, slow running, for example, and you're a power athlete, like a shot putter or an Olympic weightlifter or something like that, it does seem to be that you'll lose some top end power in an acute test. But outside of that, stop worrying about it. It doesn't matter. You can do plenty of cardio. It's just an excuse because you don't want to do cardio. I just asked, do you really think that your gains are so delicate that a walk afterwards is going to completely ruin them and blunt them? If they are, it was a wrong workout to begin with. You were too delicate to begin with, and you probably weren't going to make those gains because just living your life was going to get in the way of that. What you see is it's a dosing problem, it's a recovery problem. Like I said, it's a programming issue, or it's an issue with intent and just not really understanding what to do, when to do it, or how. There's two methods and strategies that I like to use for stacking cardio and lifting together. The first one is it's separating them out as much as possible in a given day when you can. So if you're going to be doing both cardio and lifting in the same day, most of the research says 6 hours, though most of the research has not tested a variety of other situations. So I would just say try to separate them as much as possible. Try to have a meal in between if possible, especially a high carbohydrate meal, to make sure that there is some recovery going on of either muscle glycogen, blood sugar, or intermuscular hydration. Those are all extremely important for your ability to move on and complete that next session. Of course, getting some amino acids through protein is going to help to make sure that the recovery is kickstarted and there's plenty of protein substrate to do some muscle protein synthesis, if that's going to happen during those two sessions too. If you cannot separate them, that's okay. It's not to say that you're going to completely fall apart and that's the end of it. But if you can't separate them, get carbs in your body as fast as you can after the end of that second session. So if, for example, you need to lift and then immediately go for a run afterwards, and that was how I did it for most of my sort of hybrid lifting running career. I just didn't have time to separate them by several hours. So I would do my lift, grab a gel, and immediately go out for my run. And the runs were anywhere from 3 to 7 or 8 miles. And for me, the only way to handle that and make sure that I really recovered was to not only get plenty of carbohydrate in during those runs, so sipping on electrolyte drinks that have some carbs in them, or taking gels with me, snacks, gummy bears, things like that, like high dextrose, easy to digest, high sugar, just plain table sugar kind of things to make it easy on your stomach and to make sure that you're actually absorbing it quickly. But also getting that meal in as soon as possible when that cardio is over. Even if that means like a shake in your car, and getting that recovery kick-started as fast as possible is actually incredibly important. But outside of that, you're not going to completely ruin everything. Two other ways to think about how to program some of that cardio is you can either consolidate stress or you can completely separate stress. Either is a perfectly useful way of doing this if recovery is good in between. So when I say consolidate stress, that might mean your heaviest lifting and your fastest cardio on the same days. So that might look like bike intervals or bike sprints and then heavy squats on the same days. It might mean a heavy deadlift and your run intervals or your threshold work on the same day. Whatever the different modalities are for you, putting the heaviest, fastest, most intense things together because they are the most taxing on your system. And so because you do them all in the same day, you now have multiple days afterwards to recover from both, instead of hitting one, needing to recover from it, then hitting the next one and needing to recover from that at the same time. The secondary method, as I said, is the opposite of that, which is separating them as much as possible. I find that this strategy works well when you really only have one of each kind of session. If you have multiple sessions like this during the week, it really does make more sense to consolidate them because it makes the recovery process go a little bit better for you. But if you really only do one super heavy lift and then one super fast cardio session, a really intense cardio session, do the heavy lift, give yourself a couple of days, then do the intense cardio session and give yourself a couple of days, repeat. And you'll end up with more recovery capacity, more ability to hit each one of those workouts fresh. I actually think that that's a more ideal way to do this because you're trying to maintain the sanctity of each individual session, which will be the first of probably 1,000 times you'll hear me say something like the sanctity of the session, just because I think that sounds awesome. But I think that maintaining the sanctity of the session is incredibly important because you want to be able to put as much into that session as you can so that you can get as much out of it as possible. If you show up to the sessions fatigued, yes, you might be training because the activities you're going to be doing, you'll have to remember or learn how to do them under fatigue anyway. But generally speaking, you're trying to get the most out of the session. And to do that, you need to be fresh walking into the session. The last concept I want to talk about here is the idea that lifting and cardio both sit on a spectrum of skill acquisition versus quality acquisition. For the sake of this, I'm going to stick with the idea of lifting and running because it'll be easier for me to get through it quickly by talking like that. But lifting leans heavily on skill acquisition. There's techniques, there's positions that directly determine how much load you're going to be able to move safely. But if you think about lifting and running, you usually have an end point goal. So that might be a powerlifting meet or a 5K race or a marathon race. A marathon race is a specific skill. A 1 rep max squat is a specific skill. So you're preparing for skill acquisition to be able to do those things. You are testing yourself. That's how you know it's a skill. You can test a skill. When you test an individual skill like that, you need to be perfectly prepared on the day for the test. That's why it's a skill acquisition. You usually will see, for example, powerlifters practicing a lot of heavy-ish singles for the weeks going up into their meets because they want to be prepared for the setup, the structure, the breathing, the bracing, what it ultimately feels like to try to do that heavy-ish single. For runners, if you're a marathon runner, you're often hitting like multiple 1K or 2K repeats at your marathon pace. This way you can go for several minutes feeling what that pace feels like without having to completely run an entire marathon. You might see even like progressions on the long runs. This way you end up, once you get to mile 20 on your long run to get ready for a marathon, you're at that marathon pace so you can feel specifically the skill of what it feels like to have to turn your legs over at that pace at that point in a running cycle. So those are skill acquisition things. Quality acquisition is just a generic quality that you are trying to acquire that supports those specific skills. So if you're thinking about a 1 rep max squat, what qualities support that skill? The qualities are general muscle size, cross-sectional area. How much muscle do you have? What are your limbs and joints doing? What is your anthropometry of your body doing? What is the actual ability to complete a barbell back squat look like for you? Are you able to repeat your particular form over and over again? Is it something that you feel like you've mastered for yourself within the scope of your body, right? The same kind of thing is true for, let's just say, marathon training. You are getting the quality involved of just generally being on your feet for a long time. That's what all that zone 2 cardio is. You're building the metabolic capacity, the aerobic engine, so to speak. But then you need to be doing work that's faster than marathon pace, plenty of work at threshold pace, and plenty of work at the actual marathon pace itself too, to practice, right? So all of those things are general qualities. The quality of running for a long time, the quality of running a little bit faster than I need to, the quality of what it feels like to run at that particular pace, the quality of clearing lactate and using it for energy substrates. Those are all qualities that you're generally training to get you ready for the skill test on that particular day of the marathon. And this to me is where most of those qualities really significantly overlap because you're really saying the same kind of thing. And if I take a bunch of steps back and take out some of the specific language, it's a little bit like this. You want to accumulate as much quality volume as you possibly can just underneath the thing you care about, at the thing you care about, and perhaps just over the thing you care about by a little bit. Going underneath what you care about, you can do more of it because it's easy to recover. Going at what you care about, you can do a little bit less of it because it's a little harder to recover. Doing more than what you care about is very challenging to recover from, so you should do very little of it, but not none. That's kind of it, right? Think about that for running. Go slower than your pace, do your pace, go a little faster than your pace. Think about this for lifting. Stay farther away from failure or farther away from your 1 rep max. Do some work a little closer to failure, a little closer to your 1 rep max. Perhaps do work above failure through rest pausing or drop sets or things like that. Or going a little heavier than your 1 rep max in certain areas. And that's where bands and chains and suits and accommodating resistance and things like that come into play, right? The qualities that we're working on, the kinds of things that we are training are all ultimately looked at in a lot of ways very similarly. And that may ultimately be the best way to organize your training for yourself as you're thinking through how you might program, how you might tweak a program, or how you might ultimately ask a coach to work with you, is to say, here's the qualities that I care most about for my particular goals. What's the best way to accumulate as much of those qualities as possible? Why do I care about it? And then is there even a goal, a test, a particular skill that I want to use to determine how I'm doing with these things? And it might be a powerlifting meet, it might be a bodybuilding competition, it might be a 5K race, it might be whatever, right? But that might be the skill that you need to peak for eventually. But what are the different qualities that I have to build and accumulate in order to get to that skill being its best possible version? So let me give you a quick rundown of some modalities that I love and when to use them and who should use them and why. We'll keep this short, sweet, and simple because you've stayed with me this long and I appreciate you. Unless you are a runner that competes in running, or you really love running and want to run, there's really no reason that running should be a part of your cardio plan. And that's coming from a guy who has run at this point. I mean, I've raced officially in 3 half marathons and run half marathon distances 60 plus times in my life. Like it, I've run a lot and I don't like it. I don't like running. I actually quite dislike it. But at the time, it was something that I needed to do for the specific goals that I had. Now that they're not part of the specific goals that I have, I'm not going to do very much running anymore. And that's the truth. So it's ultimately more about finding the particular modality where you can actually get your heart rate into the cardio specific zones that we're looking for. And that generally for most people is anywhere from like 120 beats per minute on the low end to maybe 180 beats per minute on the absolute highest end. But for you, don't worry about beats per minute as it gets to the high end stuff. Just work really, really hard, get extremely out of breath and sweat a lot. That's how you'll know that you're there. I find it easier to do higher heart rate work on a bike or an elliptical or a rower because you can use more of your body in those situations. You can do sprinting in those situations, which usually is very important for getting your heart rate really high up. And they're also quite safe to do in low impact. So you could do a pile of that and not really screw up your lifting too much. For zone 2 stuff, easier stuff, steps, general health, fat loss, that kind of thing, I would do things like steps. So just getting steps outside, getting steps on a treadmill, incline walking. And I also find the stair mill to be like, it's not magic, but boy, if there's magic, it might be the stair mill. The thing is horrible. The thing is amazing. You can move slowly, which is why it feels better on your joints and it feels better to do. And even though you're moving quite slowly, you're still moving at a very high heart rate because you are moving up and down stairs, hopefully just up. But you don't need to just pick one and ride it out forever. Every day you can pick a different one if you want to. Pick what's free, pick what you feel like doing, pick what's enjoyable. Just make sure you're getting the appropriate stimulus, the number of minutes and the heart rate you're looking for, and it's fine. They're all sort of interchangeable. Your heart, as it's beating at those many beats per minute, doesn't know that you're doing it on a bike for running or doing these other things. It's just feeding blood to the system. The easiest way to think about this is get your baseline target 7,000 steps a day for health. Layer on the standard exercise guidelines on top of that of about 150 minutes of moderate cardio per week or 75 minutes of vigorous cardio per week. And it is an either or. There's combos of both. You could do 25 minutes of this and 40 minutes of that and get your stuff covered. That's fine. Then from there, optionally add more cardio directly into your lifting sessions if you want to, directly afterwards. You could start with 10 minutes of cardio and it's not going to drastically impact your lifts and it'll probably help you warm up a little bit. Do lots of easy work, a little bit of moderate work, and a little bit of really hard work, and that's going to cover your needs. There is no one perfect cardio for everybody. The perfect cardio is the one you're going to do every day. That's the important thing. Remember, consistency with these things is more important than perfection. So that's what's up with cardio. I hope you decide to do something.